Hello everybody, in this video I want to go over using watercolors on wood with your wood burning. So I use watercolors all the frickin' time. Usually I'm using handmade watercolors, which are a totally different thing than just your quote normal unquote watercolors. But I do use normal watercolors regularly enough that I thought I would do a video on it for you. Now, before I get into my list of things to tell you, there is a disclaimer, and I want you to take it to heart, okay? Not all paint is equal. Not all watercolors are made equally. Some are really, really cheap, price point wise, and the quality of the ingredients, and some are really, really nice. So I highly recommend you sit down with your watercolors and maybe a piece of scrap wood or some watercolor paper and play with your watercolors a little bit first. I recommend you be at least a little bit acquainted with your watercolors before committing to using them on your pyrography. Okay, now let's get into the rest of it. The number one technique that I like to use with my watercolor is wet on dry. That means you have wet paint and you are applying it on a dry surface, as opposed to wet on wet, which is using wet paint on a wet surface. Like in the moth example that I'm doing here, I only want the green paint in the wings. I don't want the green all over everything else. So I did not pre-wet the wood. And I mentioned this wet on dry technique because it's a fairly common thing in the watercolor world, and I figured some people would want to know. Number 2, apply color in layers to build up the color. Instead of trying to get a very, very saturated color right off the bat, paint your piece in layers. Now, number 3, use the wood burned lines to your advantage to prevent bleeding. I really like to burn really deep and really dark, so my wood burn lines are like etched into the wood. They are not just sitting on the surface of the wood as a very light-handed burn. They are etched into the wood, and that really, really works well for keeping the watercolor where you want it and not letting it bleed out into other grain. Tip number 4, let your mistakes dry before trying to fix them. Whether you got paint outside of your lines, or maybe something bled, or maybe you smudged something, whatever it is, I recommend letting it dry. Don't touch it, just let it dry, and then gently sand the areas after everything is dry. I just find that that method is a lot less messy, and it will prevent smudging and messing up other areas while you're trying to fix one area. You know what I mean? And last but not least, number 5, some of your wood burn lines and your areas are going to need to be reburned if you get watercolor in those lines or in those areas. I'm just going to reburn those lines once the watercolor is dry because, like I said in my disclaimer at the beginning of the video, not all paint is equal. Some paints have cheaper ingredients. Oftentimes a cheap ingredient is like a chalky filler, and once the watercolor dries in the wood burn lines, you can kind of see this like chalky, powdery residue. And I don't like that. I want my burn lines to be crisp and dark and black, just how I burned them. I don't want them to have the chalky look to them. So I reburn all of the lines and all of the details that need to be touched up. That is it for this video. It was super short, sweet, and simple. Let me know if you have any comments, and I will have links to all sorts of different things in the video description. Okay guys, bye!